to another video here. Today we are heading to the Mount Etna furnace in Catherine Township. This is the very first iron furnace that was in Blair County, and I'm going to go take you and show you this old historic iron furnace. So I'm looking forward to this video. Thank you. Turning onto Etna Furnace Road right here, and we are heading back to the old iron furnace site. So this road takes us back into time here, about into the 1800s here. So let's go check it out. Okay, this is the Mount Etna furnace. This is the very first iron furnace in Blair County, and it was built in 1808 by Messrs. Cannon, Stewart, and Moore. This whole entire property was owned by Mr. Stewart, which had a grist mill and a sawmill on site, and he saw the opportunity to get into the iron industry, so he decided to go into partnership and build this iron blast furnace. Mount Etna would be built in 1808 and put into blast in 1809, and you always needed a running water source, which over there is a small creek called Roaring Run, and they would have directed water from this creek over to about right here. There would have been a raceway across this road, and they would have had a water wheel here, and the water wheel would turn and create air power and blow air on the fire to keep the furnace burning hot at 2,500 to 3,000 degrees. When you see an iron furnace like this today, we're very lucky. There were 231 iron furnaces in Pennsylvania, starting in the 1700s, and they would run all the way up until the early 1900s. But they typically would sit below an embankment. And you see this beautiful stacked, retaining wall that they would have built. There would have been a bridge structure here with barns up here, and the men would bring iron ore over, dump iron ore into the top of the furnace, and they would mix it with charcoal and limestone, and it would smelt inside this furnace at 2,500 to 3,000 degrees. And down here at the bottom, there would have been a large building here, or the front side where they would pull the pig iron out of the furnace. Here at the furnace, they would put the iron ore at the top, the limestone, and the charcoal, and the iron ore would smelt down at 2,500 to 3,000 degrees. And here in the front would have been a large building right here, and there would have been men inside here that they would be called gutter men, and they would pull the liquid. They would tap the furnace when the iron was ready, and they would let the liquid iron ooze out of the furnace into metal castings. And when the hot iron would come out and cool in the castings, they would take the bars of iron out, and they would take the bars of iron to local forges and foundries where they would make iron products of anything they needed at the time: tools, weaponry, wagon wheels, any cast iron, construction beams, wrought iron, nail spikes, grates, anything and everything, railroad equipment, everything they needed iron for at the time. They would produce the iron out of these furnaces. So very industrial early days here in Blair County. This is a piece of iron ore rock in our landscape bed that I've collected from the Cove, and this is the major ingredient in an iron furnace. That's what they would smelt down to get the pig iron. Here is an actual piece of pig iron from the Cove found at the Springfield furnace, and this is an iron bar that would have came right out of the furnace into metal castings, and that's what would, when it cooled and then it hardened up, and they would take these to the forges and foundries to produce their iron products. Around an iron ore site where they had the iron furnaces, you would find lots of slag, and you can kind of see it all over the place. And slag, really pretty rock. It's almost like glass-like slag. What slag is, it's just the waste during the iron making process. When you would put iron ore at the top of the furnace, mix it with limestone, the limestone would pull the impurities out of the iron ore rock, and what would be left after the clean iron was extracted from the furnace would be liquid hot slag, and the slag would float to the top of the furnace. And when they would pull all the good iron ore out, or the pig iron, they would remove the hot slag next. And what they would do is basically just take the hot slag out and dump it all around the site, and it would cool. And this is what you see today. And this, you can find slag all around an iron furnace site, kind of reminding us of the smelting days of the iron furnaces. Here's Roaring Run, and this is where they would have got their water to run the water wheel, up at the furnace over there. And I'm just down here at the creek, and you can find slag everywhere. You can find it in lots of different colors, and really pretty. This is the Mount Etna furnace property, and you can see up on the hill a structure up there, which I believe the map said it was a charcoal storage. And this is where the colliers would make charcoal out of trees. And all around these sites, the Iron Master would own thousands of acres where they would cut timber, and they would cut the timber into firewood, stack it into teepees, and they would burn it down and make charcoal. Very intense operation, but that charcoal would be the heat source in the furnaces. So they would always have a charcoal storage, which this large structure would have held the charcoal. Here's a beautiful bank barn. This was built for the iron furnace, and this is where they would keep some of their livestock and animals. But this is one of the original structures here at Mount Etna, and it's a beautiful built structure. We're talking, you know, back in the early 1800s to late 1800s. It's still standing very nicely. Now this is a beautiful property of some of the dwellings around Mount Etna. Here's what they called an old blacksmith shop here. You can see the ruins. There's a beautiful house today up here, but I believe this was originally Mount Etna's, one of their stores, but today it's a home. And here is another building over here, which I think was property where one of the early iron masters lived. And across the street here is the tenant house where a lot of the workers from Mount Etna would live. Beautiful structure. Here's some old cabins where some of the workers lived at Mount Etna. And this large tract of ground would have been the village of Mount Etna, where the workers would live. There would have been school, church, and these cabins are very old, early 1800s. These iron furnace sites would become iron furnace plantations, and what I mean by that was they would build these iron furnaces, and it would attract a whole community of people to the area to come to work. It was a great opportunity, and this is how our communities really built up in Blair County, was around these iron furnace sites. So there would have been schools, churches. Now this would have been the Iron Master's home at Mount Etna, and it was believed to be built by Henry S. Spang, and maybe about the 1840s, I believe. And after Henry S. Spang would die, Samuel Islet would buy Mount Etna, the Mount Etna Iron Works, and he would live here. And this was what would be known as the mansion for the Iron Master. And like I said, this whole area would have been flourishing at the time, with lots of people and communities. And this would have been, I believe, the church or the schoolhouse at Mount Etna. Pretty awesome property. I believe this was the foundation of the grist mill, this flat spot here. But in this area, according to the map, there was a grist mill, a sawmill. There was also an iron ore washer where they would wash the iron ore rock that was brought from Short Mountain and all the other areas where they were getting the iron ore rock. And they would clean the iron ore rock. I'll show you the map here, but there was an area that they had an iron ore washer. And a lot of my research in the iron industry has led me to be really interested in geology, especially with the iron ore outcroppings in Blair County. This is a wonderful book that was given to me by the Blair Genealogical Society. As you know, they appreciated the work I've been doing, and they kind of figured I could use the book, which I have been using it heavily during my research. But what you see here is a map of the Blair, Bedford, and Huntington counties, Morrison's Cove area, of the iron ore mines. And it's a wonderful map from 1895. In the 1800s, mining was a huge thing in Blair County, and you can see a lot of the red marks for large mining sites. Like right here is Bloomfield Mines, which is out in Ore Hill. And if we come over this way, we'll see a series of lots of different mining through the Cove. And we're going to come up here to Mount Etna, and Mount Etna would be right here. It's the Mount Etna furnace. Okay, and down here you'll see the iron ore mines just right around Short Mountain, and I'm assuming they got most of their iron ore there. There's also a couple little red dots there where they were mining iron ore, and I'm very interested in where they're mining their iron ore. I enjoy going to these sites as well. Okay, we're at the intersection of Etna Furnace and Fox Run. And if you come down here, that's Etna Furnace. Go right through this gap here, and that's where the furnace was. If you come across here today, you'll see the Juniata River, how it bends around. Right across, and this woods here would have been the Mount Etna Forge, and that's where Henry S. Spang would have made his iron products. So there was a forge back in there, and also a sawmill, according to the map. And that ground is posted, so I can't go over there. But like I said, all the properties around here would have been utilized for the Mount Etna furnace. When Henry S. Spang would buy the Mount Etna furnace in around 1820, he really started taking Mount Etna and really growing it to a large operation. And he found much success whenever the canal came to Williamsburg. The Juniata Canal came to Williamsburg about 1832, and it was right down the road from here. And they could put the iron right on the canal boats and send their iron to Pittsburgh, which was Mount Etna's main buyer was in Pittsburgh. And they could get the iron to Pittsburgh in 4 to 5 days, where versus, early 1800s, they had to take it by pack horse and wagons to Pittsburgh, and that took about 2 weeks. It was a tough journey. And the Iron Master made his money when he sold his bars of iron, or they sold the products from the forges. That's when he would actually make the money. So a lot of hard work in those early days. You know, it's hard to imagine when you come to an old industrial site like this. All you see is the wilderness, and it's very peaceful. You see this big stone stack here and some old amazing stone structures. At one time, this place was booming with hundreds of workers, iron ore miners, men cutting timber, making charcoal, the limestone quarrymen, the furnace workers, the men at the forges, the village workers. It was a huge operation. And 200 years later, this is what we have, and we're lucky to have it. Back around 1990, in the late 80s, the National Park Service was looking into making this National Historic Site. Sadly, it didn't pass with limited parking, and a lot of the property around Mount Etna was bought up privately, and there's just not enough room here to have a national park. Although it would be an ideal site with the amount of ruins that are here, and you got the Williamsburg Rails and Trails right down the street. This would have been an amazing and National Historic Site. Sadly, that will probably never come to be. But Blair County Historical Society does own this furnace, and they just own right around the furnace. They don't have any room to do anything. All of this up here is private property, so they do what they can, but it's still a site that we can come look at. So you know, we can still come here and enjoy the history. In my book, The Iron Furnaces of the Cove and Blair County Iron, there was 16 iron furnaces in Blair County, and this is the very first one at Mount Etna. Out of the 16 iron furnaces in Blair County, only 6 are standing in ruins, and this is one of 6 still standing in ruins. Mount Etna Furnace, 1809, 1872. Hello, thanks for watching the video on Mount Etna Iron Works. I look forward to bringing you more history on the iron furnaces of the Cove and eventual Blair County Iron. I'm not a certified historian, I just enjoy history. So thanks for watching.